Mr. Johnson.
Thank you, Mr. Rouser. I talk a lot about ports and ocean shipping in this committee. Sometimes my colleagues are a little confused by that. Regrettably, South Dakota does not have any oceanfront property. But then when you look at how globally connected we are, little old South Dakota, we export more than $5 billion of agricultural products a year. More than 60% of our soybeans, for example, go overseas. Manufacturing, we export more than $2 billion a year. That is, for a state of less than 1 million people, a lot. It's about $7,600 per person. And so, Mr. Edwards, it's certainly the case that what you do, what the other ports do, the whole global shipping environment does have an impact on South Dakotans, as they do on every American. And so I want to pick up where Mr. Garamendi left off. A product of this committee, particularly of Mr. Garamendi and myself, was the Ocean Shipping Reform Act. The Federal Maritime Commission has a couple of very important rules promulgation efforts underway, one on detention and demurrage, another on shipping exchanges. First, if you have any comments about those proceedings, I'd be happy to hear them. But other than that, if you have any other areas where you think some additional interest by Congress could improve ocean shipping, we're all ears.
Thank you, Congressman. What I would say is soybeans, by the way, is the largest containerized export from the Port of Virginia as well, just not South Dakotan soybeans, there's somebody else's soybeans. What I will say on the Ocean Shipping Reform Act changes that were placed in, and in particular regarding the detention and demurrage. We are an operating port, so we are a marine terminal operator, and we believe we operate well within the guidelines that are laid out. I did take time before I came here today to talk to some of the other trade coalitions, and I think the thing that is the one item that I would ask Congress to do is hurry up the Federal Maritime Commission. I think it is over a year. I think their guidelines were due to come out in June of last year, and we're waiting now on the Federal Maritime Commission, and here we are in January. So I think the whole industry is saying, from top to bottom, is saying the whole industry wants to abide by what the intent of the legislation was. Could the Federal Maritime Commission please publish that guideline so that the whole industry can then abide by it? I would say that's the most important one on detention and demurrage. I believe on the balance of trading, and in particular on exports, I do believe, I am a true believer that the private sector normally reacts appropriately in the marketplace. There are times when that may not work so well. And I think because as a political subdivision, we can take our own action to protect our exporters if, by example, imports were overwhelming the supply chain, which is what happened during the pandemic in 21 and 22, is where imports could overwhelm the pandemic and the exporter could have been harmed. I think it is important that ports as a whole realize that we are, yes, a for-profit business and we reinvest our profits back in, but we're also a public utility in the sense that we have to provide that service to the exporter as well as the importer. And there is, on a port-by-port basis, that need to understand the balance of protecting capacities if one leg is particularly clogging up the system.
So in that environment, is there an area that is particularly weak or worrisome to you over the course of, say, the next 10 years? I know a lot of ports are making a tremendous investment in additional technology to increase their capacity. I think people have a deeper understanding of their frailties coming out of the pandemic. What worries you now?
I think as we deploy technologies, and we will continue to deploy technologies, we can become smarter and smarter as an industry. I think the one thing the pandemic taught us is where do you put your surge capacity and who is reacting to that surge capacity. And ultimately, if you're going to carry redundancy, somebody normally pays for that redundancy. I do believe that you're seeing the reaction to that on a port-by-port basis across the nation. And I think it's fair to say that we would be fools if we didn't acknowledge that every port competes with every other port. We are natural competitors, so we are businesses. And therefore, it's in our own interest to be able to provide certain surge or redundant capacity as a whole. And my own take on that is my role as a port. I'm not asking the government to intervene and tell me how to do that.
Ms. Benford, you noted your company doesn't do direct federal work. You did mention that PLAs can be onerous and cumbersome. Is that type of federal regulation, is that what makes you, at least in part, less likely to do direct federal work?
We're just not really set up to do direct federal work. There's a lot of restrictions and a lot of expectations that we just don't meet as a small company. And there is not, we don't do the large jobs that would be required by a PLA.
Very good. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I yield back.